Hello, thank you again for coming back to my channel. This one is going to be on Passion 7. I'm going to reiterate some of the things I said in government because in war, it is the equality of the women in the society that allowed the society to function the way God wants our societies to function. And God created us so that when we work together, everyone that is part of it can have a part of the action and everyone can succeed. There is not a shortage for anyone that's willing to put in his share of effort. And by effort, that means there's so many different jobs that need to be done. Some people have to keep track of accounting. That means keep track of what goes through, what is owed, what is due. There are numerous jobs. Now, why do I know that? Because I am an American. I've lived here to see. Now, that being said, we can't be too difficult on anyone because the person that's telling you this is not perfect. He makes mistakes. He does things that aren't necessarily the right thing to do, but none of us are perfect. We're all learning as we work our way through. Life is a journey. We aren't born knowing everything, and we have to learn as we go. But as we learn that it is more beneficial to work with other people and contribute with once you moved around, you didn't need the cities. The ones that were close enough to the Philistines realized there was a benefit to farming, but they needed to have something to supplement the farming, so they did herding as well. Now, being the people that were part of the Israeli community, they realized that in their herdsmanship, they were not to have pigs. And that clearly shows in the archaeology as well. So, does that mean that God punishes you if you had pigs? No, God had a reason for it. God had a reason because God's reason was you would not know why for some period of time to come. And a good example of that is when one of God's children did not want to pay the tax that he owed to Assyria, and the Assyrians were at his door saying, "You got two choices. Give us the money, or we'll tear the town down and take it." Well, the king chose to pay them. Well, the general, being a horsepower engine and a general, wanted to express his power of being able to destroy Jerusalem, whether or not they had paid their bill, that there was nothing that the Assyrian king could not do if he wanted to do. And part of that horsepower engine was because of the God they worshiped. They said that we worship a God that is protecting us. Well, the Assyrians didn't worship the same God, and the horsepower engine wants to just be more powerful than anything else. Now, if they thought they had a God that was more powerful, the Assyrians want to show them that the Assyrians are more powerful than anyone's God. And they had already showed that example by destroying many of the Israeli cities other than Jerusalem. Jerusalem was a more fortified city. It was up on a hill. It was harder to conquer. And therefore, Jerusalem depended somewhat on their city. But as we know, walls are not enough to keep out the enemy. It's easy to destroy. And these destroyers wanted to make a point to the Israelites that they had a stronger horsepower engine. And he ran and raved at the people even though they begged with him, please talk a different language. We don't want to upset the Jewish people on the wall. We want them to feel secure. Tell us, threaten us, don't threaten them. No, the horsepower engine had to threaten. Now, this is another example of God using. And God used pigs in this example. And what this example is going to show is that when the king of Jerusalem was trying to withstand, he did what God told him. He stripped the gold off of the temple. He gave it to the enemy. And he gave it to the enemy to pay the taxes so they would let them live their own life in the freedom that the king knew God wanted them to have. Now, the gentleman rant and raved so long that the people did not know if the general was going to declare a war and attack the walls of Jerusalem. They had to be ready to fight. And like an obedient army, they were probably about 5,000 of them. They were waiting and ready to fight. If the general told him, we're at war, let's attack, they would attack on the notice that they were told, and they would do exactly what they were told. Now, unfortunately for the general, God had his own idea. And one of the ideas that made the Assyrians so confident is they had worked with the Philistines and had gotten some of the iron implements from them. Now, I told you the Philistines had manufactured bronze for 4,000 to 8,000 years. When they no longer could get the tin because they did not have the trading community to bring it in from even Afghanistan, and by now it's even coming from Britain, they can't go that far to get it. And their friendship with the Phoenicians have not taught the Phoenicians to go beyond the Mediterranean out into the Atlantic Ocean to the point where they can sail there and come back safely. It would take years of training before the Phoenicians were able to do what the Philistines had done on a regular basis. But notwithstanding that, the Philistines also had pigs. And when the Assyrians traded with them and bought their steel weapons from the Philistines, they also bought supplies for the army. Now, one of the benefits is bacon, other pork things that are dried, because you can create commodities by not actually creating, but just by modifying what God has supplied. Cutting up the pig, drying it, salting it, doing some things necessary to make it work. Now, what everyone knows is the thing called trigonosis. Now, what is trigonosis? You don't cook the pig long enough at high enough temperature to kill an enzyme that can kill human beings if it gets in them. Now, is it very deadly? Well, not necessarily, because it just makes people very thirsty, and if they drink enough water, then it will flush out the enzyme, and the pig that's undercooked slightly will eventually leave their system. They will get rid of it. Unfortunately for the Assyrians, in this situation, the king had to be concerned about the water, so he had created tunnels so he could tunnel the spring water into the walls of the city. So the king had done that, and when he did, it made water more difficult for the Assyrians to come by. So when the general did not know at the time, his talking and bolstering and bragging about what the Assyrians could do to the Jews was what God was using to kill off probably of the 5,000 soldiers that were there, in the neighborhood of almost 2,000 of them. Probably 1.8 thousand soldiers died overnight. Now, that will happen. If you can't drink water and you eat the pork and it's undercooked, you're going to die from it. And how do I know that? I was born in Healdsburg, California. Some gypsies came through, about 200 of them, and unfortunately they didn't cook their pork quite enough, and I think someplace in the neighborhood of 80 of them died. Now that was a larger percentage than probably from the Assyrians suffered losing, but the Assyrians thought it was a plague of some kind. They didn't know why the men died, so they deserted the weapons, they deserted anything the men touched. They got out of Dodge. As soon as they realized people were dying, they broke camp and left. And they left anything that these people that were dead had touched behind them. Now, we know it wasn't a plague, because when the Jewish people woke up and saw all these dead bodies around, they went out and collected the belongings of the people there. Now, did they bring some disease back into the city with them? Well, they may have, because shortly after that, their king did get sick. And since they didn't know anything about germs, it's quite possible that some of the germs that their king was affected with was brought back into the city as a result of them collecting from all those dead bodies. When human beings die, they need to be set off in an area away from other human beings so that the could be deadly to living people from dead people do not get transposed from the dead ones to the living. We want to ensure that we stay away from things that will kill us. We want to live as long as we can, and we want to continue living with the best life that we have. Now, I know that we have a situation that's a problem. That's one of the reasons I'm doing these videos. One of the things we have to make sure we do, and it should have been done yesterday, is make sure we get the women to be equal. That so much of what I believe is just not true. And he has shown me the truth in a lot of things. I am thankful for that, because every time I've shown truth, my life gets better. So by following God's will for our life, each time we learn something that we believe that isn't true, and we change our thinking to adopt what God wants us to know, and God wants us to know the truth. God's not trying to hide it from us. He's not trying to conceal it from us. He's giving us other human beings to help us understand the truth. And I realized I've gotten a lot of truth from my Christian brothers, but I've also learned truth from people who profess not to be Christian. Now, that doesn't mean to me that Christianity has a monopoly on God, but unfortunately, most Christians I knew do have tunnel vision of some sort. I have no doubt that I still have tunnel vision in a lot of things because I was raised a Southern Baptist. When we get a bad habit, it does not leave quickly. It may be something I'll have with me for the rest of my life. And that is, when you think a certain thing, it has a certain conclusion that you come from your thinking. And the conclusion will be wrong because your thinking is wrong. So the more truth you have in your thinking, the more your conclusions will be online. So when I hear something that sounds more truthful than what I believe, I start looking into it so I can examine, does this something that God's telling me I need to change my attitude about so that I can do God's will in my life? Well, I'm not going to die perfect, but God is going to accept me in heaven anyway because of my belief in Jesus Christ and following what Jesus Christ told us we needed to do to be saved. And I have done that. I have no doubt that I am going to be with Jesus Christ when I am gone from this earth as well. So when I say that the problem that all horsepower engines have with eternity is they can't handle it. And they can't. There's no answer for them. The answer for me is it's handled. What eternity God has for me is the eternity that I will spend with Jesus Christ. And I know I will do that. And even the people that say there is no heaven, well, even for the sake of argument, even if you're right, I'll still be spending eternity with Jesus Christ. Because if there's no heaven, he won't be there either, and I'll be with him. So, as I said, it can't be proven one way or the other. I'm quite happy with the way that I've decided. I do feel sorry for the ones that were Christians and fall away. And they fall away for one simple, sad reason. And that is they draw the conclusion, which is a faulty conclusion, that someone was perfect. And when they were perfect, they wrote in the scriptures certain things were true that are not true. And the reason God had them write those is everything in the Bible is to help someone move from where they are to where God wants them to go. And that is, God wants all of us to continue growing throughout our life. Now, there are things that you can tell a first grader that will help him to go to the second grade. But if you tell him the same things after he's in the second grade, that's not going to help him at all to get to the third grade. So he has to be told different things to get to the third grade, and different things for the fourth grade, and different things for the fifth grade. So you can't talk to one Christian like one size fits all. That is a fraud. When you are a Twiggy, a size 5, 7, and 9, you do not fit an extra, extra, extra large of the same size. One outfit will look absolutely ridiculous on the other. And it's the same with thinking. Some Christians that are very basic new Christians look ridiculous when they act like they can tell you something very advanced about God. They haven't gone through some of the basic teachings. They haven't learned some of the things they need to learn, and they still act like they know it all. But that's not for me to fix, because God didn't call me to be a preacher or teacher. But I recognize, yes, some of the preachers have been teaching for more than 10 or 20 years, and their sermon is still the same. Does that mean they're doing what's wrong? Of course not. Billy Graham did exactly what God called him to do. But Billy Graham never taught Christianity above kindergarten, the first, second, or third grade. He said, you go to a Bible believing church and you will learn there. Well, that's a good idea. Not every Bible believing church teaches the people, but a lot of them do continue to try, and we have to hand it to them for there and not criticize their shortcomings. Don't criticize anyone. We're all children of God doing the job that we feel God has given us to do. Now, as I said, I took 10 years at least to learn one lesson. So for me to basically condemn another Christian about anything he does, anything, would be an idiot that lives in a glass house going out and throwing rocks. It's not something that anyone should ever do. But Jesus has taught us the answer. You always work with people where they are. You never criticize them for anything. You do what you can to encourage them. When you do a thing that makes them feel like they're being put down, is not a Christian thing to do. Do I see churches doing that all the time? Well, the people in the church aren't all perfect, so those things are going to happen. We just would like to keep them to a minimum as much as we can and move on. But as an individual, you can make a choice. Never let anything come out of your mouth that criticizes another human being, and then you won't make that mistake. So we have to have thinking that makes us get to where we want to go. If we want to be a mature Christian, we need to learn that. But I do see some things that other people don't see, and it's time to get to the truth. Now, if you want to know whether some of the things that I'm telling you are true, I can even tell you where to go to do that. There is a gentleman, it's on YouTube as well, and all you need to know is his name, Andrew Mark Henry, or Religion for Breakfast. And when he tells you something, he has a PhD. He knows how to do all the things that need to be done to tell you the truth. So compare what I'm telling you with the things he told you, and if I have made a mistake, he can reveal it to you. He'll show you it's a mistake. But if I haven't told you, then say, okay, here's a guy with a low IQ that told me something that was true, and I learned it from him. Then start doing the truth. When you learn it's true, tell your friends, teach other people, start doing the truth. Let's make women free. For that, I'll say goodbye, and I hope everyone learned something from what I said, and you'll come back and support me. If you do, please hit the subscribe button